Hello and welcome to A Review to a Kill, the James Bond retrospective podcast where we rewatch every Bond from Connery to Craig to review and rank each one. I'm your host, Special Agent Sedgwick, and returning for this debrief is an agent that insert joke here.
Have we really gotten to the insert joke here part? 18, 19 movies in?
Yep.
Chris Carter.
Today, we are reviewing License to Kill, the 16th Bond outing from Eon Productions that was the fifth sequential and final film directed by John Glenn, making him the longest-running director. The film was also the last to feature Robert Brown as M and Caroline Bliss as Miss Moneypenny. It's the last we see of Old Dick Maybaum, Maurice Binder, and Albert R. Broccoli, because those three would die between this and GoldenEye. Yes, this is Cubby's last film.
Ouch. Everybody's pretty old by now, I'd have to imagine.
The film premiered at the Odeon Leicester Square in London on the 13th of June, 1989. Most local paper critics savaged the film. Roger Ebert loved it and called it the best Bond in a while. Retrospective reviews are much kinder, and the film sits around 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Made for $32 million, it made $156.1 million in the box office.
It's like printing money, these Bond movies.
That's why they keep making them. The film was nommed for a Golden Reel and Poe Award. Produced by Cubby Broccoli, Timothy Dalton returning. John Glenn and Mike Wilson wanted to take advantage of Dalton's darker tone and craft an original story based off of pieces of Fleming's stories, like the shark sequence from the Live and Let Die novel that never made it to film. They took crest from the Hildebrandt rarity short story by Fleming and paid homage to the Akira Kurosawa film Yojimbo, where the hero infiltrates and sows distrust among the villain's ranks to have the villain essentially bring himself down. And there's also hints of Thunderball influence throughout.
I forgot how much I did really like this movie.
They thought about setting the film in China, with planned sequences such as a chase along the Great Wall and fighting terracotta soldiers. Thank God that was scrapped. The Mummy 3 sucked.
Thank God.
They knew they wanted to write about the rising drug war and then recent events like Noriega. So after a film Tax Act in the UK, they decided on shooting in Mexico, becoming the first Bond film shot entirely outside of the UK.
What? No Pinewood?
Just some B-roll of London streets.
Interesting.
In Bond news this month, Tina Turner, singer of next episode's song GoldenEye, has died.
That is a tragedy. Scared the hell out of me in Pinball Wizard and was like a badass in Beyond Thunderdome.
In other news, the young adult author of Young James Bond Stories has publicly bashed No Time to Die, its stars, crew, and especially its writers. And this person is not an authority on anything except illustrated scholastic efforts. They are being hateful as well. We make jokes to make these episodes entertaining, and we point out objective flaws alongside the gems. But in interaction with our listeners, we fully support everyone's opinions. You like what entertains you, and so do others. And we all need to live and let die a little around here.
Yes, we do. I'm going to tell you now that a guy who writes James Bond kids books doesn't understand James Bond. His opinion really doesn't matter that much.
Depending on the canon of James Bond, a young James Bond book is either him in an orphanage or at Cambridge for 30 years.
And then in the military?
And then in the Navy, yeah.
If you're writing young James Bond books, you really don't understand James Bond.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
On the subject of tolerance towards other people's opinions, I made a poll on the YouTube page asking our subscribers their favorite Bonds. And not a single Bond had over 30% of the vote when I ended it. We're all very loud minorities, but just that. And let's all get along. Unless Octopussy is your favorite movie, then get out. By the way, for no reason at all, just to throw it out there, when I ended the poll, Connery and Craig were tied at 30%, and Moore was in dead last at 10%. Just for no reason, shits and giggles.
Just to let you guys know.
Not a single minority was a third of the fan base. No matter who your favorite is and no matter how many people like them, everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
There are reasons to like each and every one of these dudes, and there's reasons to not.
They all have their flaws, they all have their gems.
There you have it.
The dots roll out, and immediately we're hit with something we've never heard before. The opening blasts are played like quick, suspenseful stings on strings, before the tone switches to more action-oriented and familiar. Everything is exactly the same, except one thing that changes everything. They heard my complaint about the muddy Bond plate and lightened it up, which provides a better contrast with the blood plate.
I think I said the same thing last time, but it was sharper, and I guess it's because I could see it better this time.
The theme lets you know two things off the bat: that this is going to be the darkest Bond film yet, and that this film will also try to juggle multiple tones.
I guess they did try to juggle multiple tones,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, the tone just was pretty much set in the beginning of the movie.
Maybe a tone was set, and then there's another tone, and they kind of went back and forth between them.
Yeah.
The dot reveals a Northrop Grumman E2 Hawkeye flying over beautiful Caribbean waters. They are spying on a Learjet 35 landing at Crab Key. In real life, the Isla Mujeres, or Isle of Women, an island about 8 miles off the Yucatan Peninsula coast. Isla Mujeres is not far from the resort of Cancun, with the same beautiful beaches but a decidedly less spring break vibe.
It's perfect for me.
The film's underwater sequences were filmed here in these crystal waters.
Oh yeah, I could dig this place.
Cutting to soldiers on the ground, monitoring the spy plane's data, they inform Key West, Florida of the situation. Cutting to the 7 Mile Bridge in Florida, from True Lies, we see Bond in a wedding tux with top hat, crammed in the back of a cream 1959 Rolls-Royce Phantom 5, with Felix and a man named Sharky.
Yeah, the Chameleon Felix is right here in the pre-titles. And he looks like the same dude, which is remarkable because I think that's the first fucking time.
He looks like the dude from 7 movies ago.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
David Hedison ran into Cubby at a bistro in real life, and Cubby had him brought back as our first ever returning Felix, even though it's been since Live and Let Die since we've seen Hedison last. Felix isn't a chameleon. He's a Time Lord, and every now and then he reverts forms.
I like that. Felix is not a chameleon. He's a Time Lord.
Frank McRae plays Sharky because Mike Wilson wanted a character to pick on the whole script.
I can't disagree with you there.
Felix frets about the ring, and James eases his anxiety. There's a xylophone strike right here that changes the tone of the score on a dime and the tone of the movie as well.
Right. Yep.
Suddenly, they're pulled up on by an aerospatial dolphin, the Coast Guard chopper, with a follow me sign in the window. Friends of yours? James asks Felix. Felix says it's his partners at the DEA. We then cut to men sneaking up to a house on Crab Key and strangling a guard. Man, a lot has changed on Crab Key, They have housing developments. They used to have dragons.
Yeah. They used to have dragons. Now they got condos.
Cutting back to Felix running up to 2 DEA agents asking, what the hell, when they inform him they've got Sanchez and a green light. The DEA agents here are Mullins, played by Rafer Johnson, and Hawkins, who is played by Grand L. Bush, who also played Special Agent Johnson in Die Hard with his other Special Agent Johnson, Robert Davi.
That's right. They were both in Die Hard, weren't they?
Johnson and Johnson, no relation?
And also this whole movie was smashed, packed full of B-list characters from the 80s. I recognize just about everybody in this movie.
Felix hears the words green light and says, let's go, with no hesitation or thought. And when Sharky says, what the fuck, mate, it's your wedding day, Felix says, oh yeah, right, James, will you let her know for me? And Bond says, no fucking way, I'm going with you.
Yeah, right? You're abandoning your wedding. I ain't going to that shit.
James is like, I don't have any reason to go with you. And it would probably bring up legality issues if it got out that I was there, especially if I take part in the extraction in any capacity.
Right.
But fuck it, I'm going.
Fuck international law.
Felix says, strictly as an observer. Here's a gun.
Yeah, just a fucking observer.
Then they leave Sharky to whine about having to deal with Bridezilla. Women. Am I right, fellas? I hate how silly this violently dark Bond film is bookended.
Yeah.
If it's not on Davi, the tone isn't as dark as you think.
No, I get it. But I think they were trying to establish a lighter tone in certain parts of the movie to really bring home the darkness in the other parts. You know what I'm saying?
Man, we just had Roger Moore for 7 years. We don't need that contrast so blatantly shoved and crammed down our throats. This is just like when Cubby was like, You know, they're not going to get this makeup bullshit. We need a fucking ice statue and some flames. Now they'll get it. Dancing in the fire, baby.
Dancing in the fire.
Cutting back to the house on the island, we see a couple sleeping in bed when the door slams open. The girl here is Lupe Lamora, played by the gorgeous Talisa Soto.
Oh, she's hot.
Her Speedo lover is unimportant, as Franz Sanchez, the Colombian drug lord, immortalized by the incomparable Robert Davi, enters and has the man restrained by Dario, portrayed by a very young Benicio del Toro, and another goon.
Man, I thought Benicio del Toro was a teenager in this movie. He's so young.
Sanchez asks her what he promised her. His heart? Give it to her. He says in a smooth but frightening voice. And Dario whips his switchblade up without a microsecond of hesitation, as if cutting out dudes' hearts is what he lives for.
He was waiting for that order. He probably would have cut his heart out even if he didn't say cut his heart out.
Dude, he got a half chub.
Yeah, totally about it. And let's just say Robert Davi, he's got that Hollywood vampirism thing about him because he looked the same back then as he does, now. It's weird.
They take Loverboy outside for some Colombian surgery, and Lupe begs Sanchez for mercy. Sanchez says, "It's okay. I forgive you," and uncovers her back as he bends her over his knee and, taking out a short whip, spanks her violently. As she's sobbing, they awkwardly hard cut in a dude, screaming outside.
That was kind of a jarring chick getting abused, dude screaming about getting his heart cut out.
It would have worked better if it didn't feel like the audio cut in halfway. It was kind of like just a jarring hard cut of the audio.
Right?
Now, this scene is making me feel like a character is intimidating. Take notes, Casino Royale 54. His voice was so intense for being so calm. That's called presence, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Davi actually played Bond. When they were testing for Lupe, Cubby wanted Davi to help pick her, since he should love her. And Davi played Bond opposite her. So Davi chose Talisa Soto because she gave him a boner. I mean, he said he would kill for her, and the audience would believe that.
Well, there you go. He did seem like he had some feelings.
Robert Davi got an uncomfortable amount of fan mail over the whipping scene. Robert Daddy.
Ooh, GoDaddy.com.
Davi also used method acting and went around Mexico City offset as Sanchez with Del Toro. Davi also played pranks on Del Toro. Cut to Sharky, nervously running up to a limo and telling them to hit the block a few more times. Della and her father are super pissed. Cut back to Felix and Bond approaching the island when they're spotted by Sanchez. His squad rolls out in a green 1950 Willys Jeep, and on the way to the airstrip, Sanchez jumps from the vehicle at speed, rolling into the grass. Meanwhile, the chopper lands and the good guys egress, save for James, who has to stay there. Then why'd you bring him? There's a sweet 80s slow-mo shot of the agents running at the camera before they storm the Learjet. And just then, shots ring out, and they turn to see the Jeep driving up on them. The goons fire wantonly, and the good guys fire indiscriminately at the Jeep, using assault rifles, with an unarmed girl in the back covering her head in a fetal position.
Yeah, I noticed that. Nobody noticed the hostage in the back seat?
She's very obviously covered, panicked, and trying to protect herself.
Right.
Bond makes the helicopter take him 50 feet to the left, and he jumps down to disable the Jeep by firing at its engine block with his pistol, as it's speeding right at him and only missed him from sheer luck. The goons flee from the Jeep and into the brush, and Bond asks Lupe if she needs help, just for her to rebuff the offer. And all of a sudden, they hear a small craft engine start and look over to see a Cessna Skyhawk rolling down the strip. The plane takes off, and Bond and co. board the chopper to chase it down. Now, I looked it up, and the helicopter has a max speed about 30 knots faster than the Cessna, so this is possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When this scene was going down, I was wondering why the chopper, because these are Coast Guard operatives. As you know, they're military trained, and as you know, most helicopter pilots are warrant officers. Why did they even stop to pick those guys up?
Why didn't they just block the runway?
Right. Why didn't they just block the runway? Plenty of time, plenty of space, plenty of speed.
They get the chopper over the plane, and Bond gets the rescue line attached to him before lowering down to the Cessna in midair. For the wides of this sequence in the skies, they used trusty aerial stuntman Jake Lombard. Close-ups and mids were captured about 20 feet off the ground. Dalton dangled from the helicopter, though. No green screen, just camera angle tricks. The crew were more used to and accepting of Dalton wanting to do more stunts on his own, as he thought it helped bring the audience along with the character for the ride.
Dalton was the first Tom Cruise, and whoever directed this film was the first Christopher Nolan. I was like, wow, Christopher Nolan stole that trick, huh? Totally stole that trick. Then we'll call it influence. He was influenced by a James Bond movie.
Very much so.
And the other thing I noticed in the stunts, like, they were really well done, except the close shots, his hair wasn't even moving.
Bond lands on the tail of the plane and latches the line around it. With the plane snagged, the helicopter pulls it up and carries it away. This was achieved by dragging a fake plane with another plane off screen that released the tow line.
Yeah, like a bigger plane. Very cool.
Bond and Felix skydive down from wherever they caught up to Sanchez when they left Crab Key. But they happened to perfectly land in front of the chapel for Felix's wedding. What?
Well, didn't you see the helicopter just carry a Cessna over populated city?
I hope Bond really secured that latch.
Exactly. You don't know how many air violations that had to have been.
Also, one physics violation. As in, I looked up that chopper's range, and it's 300 miles max.
Yeah.
So, from the Keys to the Bahamas is 277 miles. You can't even get there and back. And there's definitely no hovering, no fucking around in a fight. Then when you get there, there's no high fuel consumption air chases, and there's definitely no towing other aircrafts. Reality says all of this is impossible.
All of this is impossible.
David Hedison fucked his leg up on these cheesy skydive landing shots when the crane dropped him way too hard.
Oh, poor David.
They walk into the chapel with the bridesmaids carrying the wedding dress train and others carrying the agent's dragging chutes in the same manner.
Did you notice they only carried him right up to the door, though?
No, because I stopped caring right then. At that exact moment, they stopped.
Fair.
I tried to get my girlfriend to watch this movie, saying how awesome and dark it was. And then it started with Sharky and wedding hijinks, and she was out. Hard insert of a camera framing the plate. We pan back to reveal the girl holding the camera and the 007 gun logo in those fucking dots again. They'll never die. Shameless Olympus plug.
Shameless Olympus plug.
There's some odd wipe transitions and static photos. Smoky blue, naked silhouettes, rotoscoped assets, all the key effects he could think of, and all the best computer animations 1989 could offer him. Like a crosshair.
Like a crosshair.
But Maurice didn't bring the energy to these titles, and to be fair, he was dying of old age at the time.
Well, to be fair, maybe he just didn't quite
have it in him. I'm sorry.
I found the title sequence to be not boring.
Well, it wasn't boring. That's not one word I could use to describe it, that's for sure. But jarring sure is.
It wasn't boring.
Chaotic?
It was somewhere in between trying to tell a story and really fucking that story up.
It was somewhere in the depths of I'm just throwing shit at the wall, it felt like for me. Anthony Way, back as production supervisor, underwater scenes by the winner of Best Name Award, Ramon Bravo.
Ramon Bravo. That's a hell of a name, man.
Hell of a name, dude.
That's a hell of a... Ramon Bravo? God damn.
Stunts by Paul Weston. Driving stunts by Remy Julien. And aerial by Corky Fornoff. Production supervisor in Mexico, Hector Lopez. Assistant directors, the Miguels, Gil and Lima. Art director, Michael Lamont. Peter Lamont's brother, who'd been doing additional art direction since For Your Eyes Only, getting the promotion here. Peter Lamont's son, Neil, also starts work on the franchise with this film. Set decor by Michael Ford, edited by John Grover. The Woo on second unit.
Hey, did the Woo get the treatment this time? I could have swore I saw a little nipple.
The Woo deserves a treatment. How has he not gotten it yet?
Right? That's what I was thinking.
Titles by Maurice Binder, For the Last Time. I'm glad the last two titles happened because they were really good. He went out with all his skills on full display and made some of his best work. But this one feels like for his last ride, he just wanted to have some fun with it. And he got a late 80s computer with a 6-pack of effects, and I'm glad he enjoyed playing around with it, but for Christ's sake, they're not good. Some are jarring, and the best elements feel like he could have done them so much better himself because there's such obvious edge lines on the composites.
Yeah, that's true.
But knowing what we know is probably the best he could do, honestly. Just getting it done.
Right.
Original score by Michael Kamen. Barry was intended to return, but was recovering from throat surgery, and The Living Daylights would now become his last Bond film. All the OGs dropping like flies.
Dropping like flies.
Special effects John Richardson, director of photography, a returning Alec Mills. I'll admit, I wouldn't have liked his style for any other Bond, but he fits Dalton's style of focus on storytelling.
Yeah?
With any other Bond, he wouldn't showcase anything that fit with their style.
No.
Production design, Peter Lamont. Associate producers, Tom Pevsner and Babs Brock. Written by Mike Wilson, with them giving Dick his final writing credit for his treatment contributions. The dynamic duo penned a treatment, and then the 89 writer's strike happened, so Dick was out, and Mike fucking Wilson is the person who actually wrote this script. Mike Wilson sucked like 5 movies ago. His first movie, he sucked.
He did.
Second movie, not much better. And every movie after that has gotten miles and miles better than the last.
This is true.
This dude can write now.
He's learned how to construct a movie.
Produced for the final time by the man, the myth, the legend, Albert R. Cubby Broccoli, the Highlander of the Brock and Salt connection.
That's fucked up.
And the builder of the longest running film franchise of all time.
Of all time.
Oh, and his stepkid, Mike G. Wilson, also produced by that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Directed by John Glenn, who is a good director. He is, but thank God it's his last turn because he's just out of his era, honestly.
Yeah, it seems like John Glenn does not know how to progress past what he has already known.
He was taught in the era of Hitchcock, and it shows. And the fact that it still shows means he hasn't grown much since then. As great as he is, and as much as he's achieved, and as great as skilled as he was, he hasn't grown.
No, he has not.
Zoom in to the camera lens again, which this time reveals the movie proper. Inside an office, in a Coast Guard facility in Florida, Sanchez is getting the business from government agent Killifer, played by Everett McGill. Sanchez looks unbothered as the agent with the spoilerifically evil name says, "Even one of your famous $1 million bribes won't get you out of this." And Sanchez, cool as ice, just says, $2 million to the man that gets me out of here. And Killifer lashes out but is detained.
Oh, your typical good cop, bad cop. It doesn't matter. I have so much money, it does not fucking matter.
I like how they tried to pull a really weak rope-a-dope when he's like, $2 million, and it cuts to Hawkins' face real quick, like, oh, and then it cuts to Killifer getting mad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Killifer must be the good cop, and Hawkins, oh, you better watch out. He might try and steal that shit.
Right. Yes.
I mean, to be fair, they didn't put much effort into it.
Just a little bit. To be fair, it was the early 80s, and they did kind of plot it on the black dude, so I'm sure a lot of people got it.
We then cut to forced sexual tension between Bond and his best friend's new wife, because every fucking woman wants Bond, even if they're children or his best friend's girl. I hate this shit.
I kind of do too. It's like, why is it every woman?
Why do you have to have forced sexual tension with on the wedding day? Oh my God, that's your best friend's wife, dude.
By the way, Felix's wife is the chick that replaced Chrissy in Three's Company.
Her maiden name is Churchill, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Della sends James to get Felix for cake cutting, and Bond walks in on Felix giving an envelope to a woman in his office that he calls Pam. Now, Pam ditches immediately, and Felix says, "Strictly business," as he saves the reports on his desktop. They exposit on Sanchez a bit and build his character on a Pablo Escobar-inspired foundation. Plomo o plata. Just then, Agent Ed Killifer enters and says they're about to take Sanchez to Quantico, and then exits to kiss the bride. What a hoe.
Right? All over every guy around.
If my wife goes out oh my God, is that a thing? Did I miss that at weddings?
Nah, older weddings is kind of a thing.
I'm going to go to your wedding and start making out with your wife. I thought it was good to be the king. Apparently it's good to be any dude.
Or it's good to be the wife.
Cutting back to the extradition, and it's become a media circus. A female reporter asks Sanchez to look back for a photo, to which he obliges, smiling. This man drips charisma. It's oozing out of his fucking ears. He's so backed up with it.
Robert Davi is so fucking charming and menacing at the same time.
It's amazing.
Crazy, right?
They keep asking questions as Sanchez is secured, playing it chill as gangsta the whole damn time. The doors are closed and they're on their way. We then cut back to the wedding as Felix and Della give Bond a gift on their wedding, which for me is also weird.
You're supposed to get a best man gift.
A silver lighter with the words James, love always, Della and Felix. The lighter is also practically a trick lighter with how far the flame shoots out when turned all the way up, as it is when he's given it.
Right. Who does that with a lighter?
Crackheads.
That's out of control for even a crackhead, man.
Even as a child, something about all of this stood out to me. I'm not lying. As a child, this really did. Love always Della. And she's acting to him like he means as much to her as he does to Felix. And he's known Felix for decades worth of adventures, and they're just throwing her in, which I get, they have to. And who's to say Bond hasn't been to years worth of barbecues with these two? But it just feels so forced that even a child can pick up on it.
It is absolutely forced. None of these people except Felix has a history.
You can sink us in with the happiness in the couple and get us ready for the devastation. But you don't have to make it seem like Della and Bond mean as much to each other as Felix does. He's his best friend.
Right.
He's probably his only real friend.
Right.
It should honestly be like how much she means to Felix, especially with what's about to happen anyways. And because Felix means that much to Bond.
Right.
Everything felt right, a little weird, but still within the realm of normal and natural until the lighter. And even as a kid, I was like, why does she love him that much? I don't get it. The way they're framing all of this is
forced.
It's so forced.
Absolutely forced.
Back to Sanchez on the 7 Mile Bridge. In the cab of the armored vehicle, Killefer knocks out the driver with the butt of his shotgun and drives the 1981 Utilimaster Aeromaster off of the bridge and into the sea. As it settles, the 2 guards in the back open up the doors and swim for the surface, just as 2 Scuba Steves swim in with air for Sanchez and Killefer, and they all get away on Thunderball scooters.
Even swimming out of that, I think I might have noticed 2 large silhouettes swimming up underneath me, because I'd have been scared shitless and looking around.
I don't care. I'm going for the surface. I'm not going out like Sonic. We cut again to Bond, and it's now nighttime. Bond is leaving the party, finally, and Della wants to toss him the garter, so he's next to be married. And Bond, with a small, hurt smile, says, "No. Thanks, Della. It's time I left." And she throws it anyways. He catches it, smiles, and drives off in a 1987 Lincoln Mark 7. I guess it's a rental.
It must be a rental.
Who drives a
Matthew McConaughey drives a Lincoln. Don't make fun.
Listen, I don't drive the Lincoln, okay? The Lincoln drives me.
The Lincoln drives me.
Della asks if she said something wrong, and Felix hugs her, saying, "Bond was married once, but that was a long time ago." And boom, yet another continuity thread proving that Bond is always the same guy, not a code word. Honestly, I don't even know how this is a credible theory. Why have 007 even if Bond is the passable code?
Right. James Bond and 007 are not interchangeable.
No Time to Die proved that too.
Right.
Felix carries Della inside to find Sanchez's goons waiting on him. Dario knocks him out from behind and they restrain Della. Cut to the Ocean Exotica warehouse, where inside, Sanchez is met by Milton Crest, played by Anthony Zerbe. Crest, as I said before, was the character taken from the Hildebrandt rarity.
Yeah.
Crest wants to move Sanchez out of the country now, but Sanchez says, "Wait for Dario." Crest also wants to kill Killefer, but Sanchez says, "I made a deal with him, and I'm going to keep my word." Crest points out how much money he spent on this, and Sanchez says, "Loyalty is far more important than money, gringo." Bitch.
Typical drug lord.
Well, it's very Pablo Escobar.
Yeah.
All of his behavior and character traits, it's all from Pablo Escobar. Throw the money around like crazy, build up love with the people, act like a saint, but really you're like murdering people heinously.
This movie feels very Miami Vice-y.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Michael Mannish.
They call Killefer in and give him his $2 million. Dario enters, and Sanchez tells Crest to keep Lupe on the boat, but not to touch her. Crest laughs. Are you kidding? After what you did to that guy on the island? Oh, you like my little Valentine, huh? Sanchez chuckles as he leaves the office. In the warehouse, they drag a blindfolded Felix and half a cow to a hatch before removing the blindfold and letting Felix see his tormentor's face. Where's my wife? He asks. Don't worry, Dario says, smiling psychotically. We gave her a nice honeymoon.
Benicio del Toro is so creepy.
It was so fucking creepy. In the best way.
In the best way. Oh yeah, totally best way.
Sanchez tells him it isn't personal, even though it totally is.
It feels real personal.
I can't see how it's not. They hook Felix up by the wrist to one end of a pulley system and the slab of cow torso on the other. They then push the cow slab into the pool, rocketing Felix up. As the sharks eat the beef, Felix lowers into the tank. Felix looks over and says, Killefer. And Killefer says, sorry, but $2 million is a hell of a chunk of dough.
I think he's kind of an asshole in every movie he plays.
He's got that face.
Yeah.
Especially with a cigar in it.
Pretty sure he was in Silver Bullet.
Killing me won't stop anything, Sanchez. Oh, there are far worse things than dying, hombre. See you in hell. Sanchez just laughs. No, today is the first day of the rest of your life. As Felix is savagely attacked by sharks, biting his legs and groin. You didn't need that, did you?
That's fucked up.
Cutting to the airport, and Bond drives his rental to the terminal to check in. He notices all the badges running around the airport and asks what's going on. The attendant says some drug dealers just escaped, and Bond immediately 180s out of the airport. He drives to Felix's house and finds Della dead on the bed. I mean, I think she's dead. She looks very fucking alive to me, but maybe that's just because I've seen what dead people actually look like. Also, how did she die? Just lay there, you're dead.
And I also found it odd, like, a phone booth wasn't the first place Bond went to. Like, should I miss my flight? Let me call Felix. Maybe he knows what's going on. Nope, I'm going to rush right over to this dude's house immediately.
Could have been any drug dealer who escaped.
Right? Any drug dealer.
In Felix's tossed office, Bond finds the mutilated man himself with a blood-soaked note that says he disagreed with something that ate him. Ba-dum-bum. Felix stirs to let us know he's alive, and the phone rings. It's Hawkins, looking for Felix, and Bond says to get an ambulance there, quick. A time jump later, and Sharky is there asking Bond what happened, and Bond says his left leg is gone below the knee, but they might be able to save the arm. Another time jump later, and now at the hospital, Sharky says that those are shark bites.
Well, of course he does. But his name's Sharky.
He would know.
He knows everything about sharks.
But he also has a fear of them?
Yeah, I noticed that. Like, Sharky's afraid of sharks?
Bond and Sharky go looking for places that have tanks with sharks, and the last place that they try is Ocean Exotica. Sharky pulls in, and Bond goes in to investigate. Inside, Crest says that he sold his sharks years ago, and they just breed super large fish now for third world countries, feeding them maggots.
Maggot feed. I love it. Yum.
Bond spots a small submersible named Shark Hunter 2, and Crest tries to usher him out.
I like how Bond just ignores that dude and just has a look around.
Oh, you don't have any sharks. What's up with this Shark Hunter 2?
Right?
Right next to your other craft, I'm a Liar 4.
Right?
Bond leaves, and the camera swings to Felix's boutonniere in a trash pile on the floor. Cutting to later that night, Bond and Sharky are sneaking back into the warehouse when a sub passes by underneath, smuggling people out. As Bond is walking on a grate, a shark bites underneath it. Inside the warehouse, he also finds little sharks in aquariums.
Right? There are sharks everywhere.
I think that guy is not honest with us, man. Bond opens a bin of maggots and finds cocaine buried in them. When a guard comes up on him, Bond throws maggots into his face, punches him, and throws him into the maggot drawer. He closes the drawer with the man in it, saying, Bon appetit.
Gross. I would not like to be locked in a cabinet full of maggots. I'm just saying.
Well, he is killed by them.
Like, how long does that take?
Well, maybe he's suffocated.
Well, I mean, that's what it'd have to be. It's like, maggots take some time.
Just then, another guard starts firing randomly at all the equipment with a machine gun. They shoot up their own tanks, and I feel like this scene has a very heavy Die Hard influence.
Fair.
The music, the methodic pacing of the guard with the OP weapons, it all feels very Die Hard. Bond then hooks the guard and dispatches of him in an electric eel tank. And do you want electro? Because that's how you get electro.
Right? For real.
Killifer shows up with his briefcase of $2 million. He has Bond open the hatch, exposing the shark, and says Sanchez and Crest fed Felix to it. Bond punches Killifer over the edge, but Killifer grabs the chain. Dangling, he tells Bond there's $2 million in that case, and he'll split it with him. And Bond says, "You've earned it. You keep it, old buddy," and throws the case at Killifer's gut, causing him to fall in and be instantly killed by the shark that took forever to maim Felix.
I guess he was hungry. He only got an arm and a leg out of Felix.
Yeah. He was like, you know what? I can't tease. They'll take it away.
They'll take it away.
That's fair.
Yep. And I think this might be the next most cold-blooded killing next to kicking the car off the cliff.
Sharky finally shows up and says, "What a terrible waste of money." Cringe.
Ha, 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 ha. It wasn't very funny, this movie.
This movie was very dark. I don't think it was trying to be funny.
During that whole shootout and everything, Bond takes a moment to save a lobster, I guess, and laugh out loud.
So Sharky was written out of that entire sequence by being petrified by the shark encounter outside on the grates, spending the entire time working the nerve to come in after Bond. But now, we immediately cut to Sharky's charters and his fucking boat. So this man is paralyzed with fear by being near the water with a shark in it, but he captains fishing tours in shark-infested waters. Brilliant.
And his name is Sharky.
It's just amazing writing, Michael. Great job.
Good job.
I was complimenting you earlier, but not for Sharky.
Why is he even in this fucking movie?
To be a punching bag.
By the way, Sharky is played by the same guy who was in Used Cars, played the mechanic.
Bond asks Sharky about the Wave Crest, and Sharky says it's a big marine research vessel owned by Milton Crest, collecting samples off the K-Cell Bank. It would take about 6 hours to get there. And Bond says, "Get ready, because we leave in an hour." And then he departs. As Bond is walking away, Hawkins approaches him and asks about a tip to local cops, about a warehouse that turned up 5 keys of coke, some stiffs, and a little piece of what used to be Killifer.
A little piece? How'd they identify him? It was the little piece with his wallet?
No, it was his lips with a cigar.
Nah.
Bond says, "Good. At least someone's on the case." Hawkins says, "Bro, I can only cover up so much. We got laws here." "You got a law about what they did to Leiter?" James says, as more agents surround him. "Look, you're in over your head. This is where it ends, Commander," Hawkins says, and has the British agents escort him inside the Hemingway house, where Bond is chastised by M.
Surprise! Old man didn't bring an office this time.
Bond jumped assignment for his personal vendetta, and M wants him on a plane to Istanbul this afternoon to do his job. Bond says he isn't finished yet, and M says leave it to the Americans. And Bond says but they aren't going to do anything, and that he owes it to Leiter. M says spare me the sentimental rubbish. He knew the risks. Bond is compromising Her Majesty's service. M expects Bond to carry on objectively and professionally. While being dressed down, Bond is stewing, the anger slowly rising until Bond just straight resigns. M revokes Bond's license to kill and demands his badge and gun.
This is a late 80s cop movie with a James Bond budget, and I'm here for it.
Bond grabs his gun as if to hand it over and attacks the agents in proximity before diving off the porch and rolling into the brush to avoid the sniper. M stops an agent from shooting Bond and looks very sad as Bond runs off. So, why did Bond do this? To keep his Walther? Why? Just hand over the gun and leave and do whatever, go wherever. But no, fight these guys and catch a charge in an international manhunt because you love that gun. It's Florida, homie. There's gun stores everywhere.
This shot, this scene, was the highlight, the high point of the trailer. This was all over the place. James Bond's going rogue. Look at him. He's jumping off the balcony. He pushed him down. Oh my God, look at him.
They wanted to strip Bond of his gadgets and even his ability to wantonly kill to get out of a situation. I mean, he still will kill people, especially to save himself. But the movie is centered on Bond using new tactics, and having Bond go rogue helps the later infiltration angle.
Yeah, this is the typical, we're going to take away your utility belt, Batman. What are you going to do now?
Cutting to the Wave Crest at night, we see Crest perving on Lupe before entering her cabin drunk and being that weird level of drunk where he feels brave enough to say everything on his mind.
That weird level of drunk where he feels brave enough to fuck with a man's girl who just cut a dude's heart out. That's a different level of drunk, I'm just saying.
We then cut to Bond underneath the boat disguised as a manta ray. Pretty good disguise, I thought.
It was a great disguise, and I'm wondering to myself, where the fuck did he get that? And the scuba gear?
He rented the gear and the manta ray thing. He went to Michael's craft store. Bond follows a submersible probe into the moon pool of the Wave Crest and drowns a goon before throwing him into a pressure chamber with giant bundles of cash. Bond sneaks around the ship and into Crest's room as we see more goons find the first one in the chamber. In Crest's room, Bond uncovers Lupe from the bed and puts a knife to her neck whilst holding her mouth, saying, "Make a sound and you're dead. Why are you in Crest's cabin?" And she explains that Crest gave her his cabin and Crest is next door. Bond asks where Sanchez is, and she says she doesn't know. Just then, Crest knocks on the door and she answers through a cracked door, telling him to go away. Crest says there's an intruder aboard, so bolt the door. And Bond notices her whip gashes. She says it was her fault. She did something wrong and made him angry. We then hear a boat horn and see Sharky's boat pulling up with Sharky dead and hung up with the sharks. A scuba goon named Clive, played by Eddie Edenfield, says, "And guess what? His name was Sharky," and laughs. Bond is shook and says, "You better find yourself a new lover."
Rip, Sharky.
Bond exits the cabin and grabs a harpoon gun as Clive is boarding the Wave Crest. And just when Clive looks over at Bond, Bond says, "Compliments of Sharky," and fires into Clive's gut. Bond dives down and steals Clive's scuba tank as Crest sends divers into the water.
Yeah, there he goes again, just murdering willy-nilly. Having a license to kill doesn't really matter to James Bond, because he's kind of a sociopath.
Hey, the Queen looks for malcontent youth.
Well, there you go.
As the goons look for Bond, they send the sub-probe over to a Cessna Skywagon for other nefarious types to unload its payload of cash bundles and replace it with bundles of coke. When the smuggling sub is on its way back to the ship, Bond opens it and stabs the coke bundles, ruining them. In a desperate bid to save his product, Crest has the sub surface. The goons see Bond and fire at him. Bond dives back down, but they know where he is now and the chase is on.
Dun, dun, dun.
As Bond is getting choked out by one scuba Steve, another cuts his air hose, which by Thunderball rules means he's almost dead.
He should be dead by Thunderball rules.
But luckily they didn't get his mask off, and he fights them off, eventually taking a harpoon gun and firing it into the pontoon of the smuggler's sea Cessna that's now taking off.
I wonder how many James Bond movies are under fucking water.
A lot.
I guess he was a naval commander, which would make him some sort of frogman, so I guess he would be underwater a lot.
The Bond theme strikes up, and Bond starts water skiing on his feet behind the plane while being shot at. He whips around and smashes into the pontoon, grasping it and taking off with the plane. Now Bond is barely dangling from this plane in the air, and they're trying to shake him. A lot of great stunt work in one sequence here.
Oh man, this was a great sequence all the way around.
The diving, the scuba, the skiing, the dangling, the aerial.
Right?
Bond gets into the cabin and tosses out a goon before blocking the other's gunfire with a cash cube. Bond throws the other goon out and makes off with the plane full of cash. Cutting to later on, we see Bond sneaking into Leiter's office and retrieving a CD from behind a photo of Della. Putting the disc into the computer, Bond sees Felix's files on Sanchez. Pulling up the informants, he sees they're all dead but one, P. Bouvier, with the next meeting scheduled Thursday after midnight at the Barrelhead Bar on Bimini in the Bahamas. Though all of that will still be shot in the Keys.
And when he's putting that computer or that disc in the computer, I was thinking to myself, man, '89. How high tech was that? Look at that computer. That thing was smoking.
Look at that tray. Jesus. Cutting again to later, and Bond is pulling into the dock parking of the Barrelhead Bar in a cigarette racing cafe racer, which he tells the valet to put Stern in. Inside, it's every 80s bar ever, a la Roadhouse. Bikini stripper on a table, bad music, and piss-colored lighting over endless amounts of wood.
Darker version of Porky's.
Bond asks the bartender for P. Bouvier, which the bartender points out as the girl from Felix's office at Felix's wedding. P for Pam, played by Carrie Lowell, and her lazy eye.
And her lazy eye. She's so cute I didn't even barely notice.
I did, because as an actor, you don't really want to look at the camera too often, and she really tries not to, but one is just not cooperating.
Always looking at the camera. Yes, I noticed.
She asks where Leiter is, and Bond says the hospital, and tells her that Sanchez has Leiter's files and will be looking for her. She points out 2 goons at the bar that had been staking her out for hours, probably to see who came to meet her. A waitress comes by, and Pam orders drinks, as Dario and another goon enter the bar. 4 more goons enter the other side door, and Pam asks Bond if he's carrying, to which Bond flashes his Walther. She tisks him and reveals her shoddy, telling him just to hit the deck if they start shooting. The balls on this bitch, man, they huge.
The balls on this bitch. Oh, you effeminate, fairy little man with your cute little gun and your posh British accent. You're in Florida, bitch.
You're worthless here.
Yeah, right? Calm down. You're in Florida.
Dario and Mexican Barry Nelson sit at Bond's table, saying, La Señorita Bouvier, don't I know you? Yes, you used to fly charter planes for some friends of mine. I got a job for you. Why don't we go outside, talk in private? And Bond says, she's with me, take your hands off her. And Dario barely acknowledges this, past telling Bond that no one is asking him. And Pam puts her shoddy against Dario's tamale and says, he's with me. Now hands on the table.
Pretty bold move right here. I just shot him, personally. When I see a problem about to approach and I have the advantage of that problem, I will eliminate that problem. Just that simple.
It's a little psychotic.
It's a lot safer.
It's a little psychotic, it's a lot safer. Dario smiles, and the waitress brings drinks. Senor Nelson says, let me get it, and reaches into his coat before Bond does the pencil trick without the pencil. And Bond says, he's had enough, run the tab.
I like how the waitress was just pretty much non-pulsed.
Benicio del Toro is fucking amazing, hands down. You can't deny he knows exactly how to breathe the most psychotic life into this character without going over the top. Now, we said Christopher Walken did not go full Walken, but he still went over the top. And this never gets like that. It's not cartoonish crazy. It's just creep at all times, in the best of ways. You truly believe he enjoys all of this.
Benicio del Toro is perfect in this role. Almost everything he does.
It's that smile that you know he's not undressing you with his eyes, he's flaying you with his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Bond says his boat is right behind them on the other side of the wall. Pam blasts her shoddy, and Dario does his signature knife pose. Bond punches Dario, and the bar brawl ensues. Typical shit. Punches, grabs, chair smashing, table crashing, pool cues swung and snapped. No throats pulled out, though.
No throats pulled out. Plenty of bottle smashing.
Someone does use a swordfish as a sword.
Maybe more of a spear.
Pam breaks a bottle over that fool's head, though, and Bond says, touche, before getting punched out by a random islander. You really are useless in Florida.
It's a whole different beast down here.
You can't fuck with Florida, man, Bond. You don't know what you're up against.
You don't know what you're up against. It's Florida.
Timothy loosened up for this film compared to last time. He really did. She's almost more no-nonsense than he is right now.
Absolutely. And doing more damage.
She saved his ass, and then he got knocked out anyways.
Mm-hmm.
She knocked out the islander attacking Bond, and Bond looks up at the stripper, still just wiggling her hips on the table. When watching this scene with my wife, all she could say was, why is the stripper still just dancing in all of this chaos? Even when Pam blows a perfectly circular hole in the wall, Acme style, the stripper doesn't even flinch or take cover. I mean, but at least she stops dancing. Bond and Pam get in his boat to drive off, but Dario leans out of the hole and shoots Pam in the back. Bond cheeses it, and Pam pops up, revealing she was wearing a bulletproof vest. This Kevlar's great.
New stuff.
That line was so cheesy.
It was.
It's like Mike wanted to show off that he learned what the vests were made out of. Very forced and inhuman.
Yep. Well, they were new at the time. And yes, all of that.
They get into an argument about safety and professionalism, and Bond runs out of gas as they must have hit his fuel line. Bond wants to know all she knows on Sanchez and says he'll pay her very well for the info and to get him to Isthmus City. They haggle about price and bang, trusting the boat to drift closer to shore than further to sea.
I thought it was really weird how they haggled for price and then just
Bang.
Yeah, right?
Well, you gotta have a handshake after the deal, bro.
Yeah, but that's a weird fucking handshake. You guys just met.
Oh, everything else is normal, but all of a sudden a handshake is weird.
Well, a fuck for a handshake? That's a little weird for a person you just met.
You're such a prude.
I don't.
You should have done more ecstasy in your life. Giving gifts to people on your wedding is okay, but no, I can't screw this girl to cap a deal.
I wouldn't say I wasn't gonna say I wouldn't have.
Cut to M, telling Moneypenny off now. But there are over 5 typing errors on that one page alone, so. Moneypenny says she's worried about James, and M says his men in Isthmus will stop him. When M leaves, she phones Q Branch.
Moneypenny's a fucking boss. You notice how she interrogated M without M noticing that he was being interrogated? He gave up exactly where Bond was headed, and her next move was to call Q Branch. Moneypenny's the true boss. Moneypenny is probably the second in command there.
I like how you forgot how we noticed a few movies in how boss Moneypenny is at manipulating everything to keep up, and how sharp M is at knowing what's going on still.
Yeah.
Well, that was the old M.
I totally think that this M gave the information up, knowing full well what Moneypenny was up to.
Admiral Hargreaves. This M is not as smart as Bernard Lee's M.
You don't think he gave up the information voluntarily?
No, I think she manipulated him.
Yeah.
I think he is a big softy. You're 100% right. But I also think he's not as sharp as Bernard Lee's M, as Miles was.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that.
You notice, unlike the last Bond, he had almost complete trust in this guy immediately because he'd seen him save the world a few times before he even got the job, and he already knew of the reverence.
Yeah, absolutely.
We cut to establishing shots of the fictional Isthmus City and the equally made-up Republic of Isthmus, whose presidente, Hector Lopez, is played by Pedro Almendarez Jr., Karim Bey's son in real life.
Oh, really? Nice. That's pretty dope.
The Republic is based on Panama, and that explains its neck-based name, but is mostly shot in Mexico City. Bond and Pam are driven to the El Presidente Hotel in a baby blue 1978 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow 2.
Oh, so pretty.
The exterior of the hotel is the real-life Biblioteca de la Banca de Mexico, and the interior is the Gran Hotel Ciudad de Mexico. Inside, Bond is shown his suite, which he calls adequate, and orders a case of Bollinger. Bond then demeans Pam by calling her his secretary, Miss Kennedy, and has her sign for everything. After she voices her dismay, he laughs and says that south of the border, it's a man's world. He then tries to pay her off, but she won't leave, citing that she isn't safe until Sanchez is dead. I think it's safer to go into hiding while this guy goes Rambo on them instead of me going with them to the people looking to feed me to sharks, but that's just me.
Well, yeah, no, you're not wrong, Matthew, because, a large chunk of money from a psychopath about to go hunt and potentially murder the guy who's looking for me,
if I'm lucky, and more likely get killed himself,
would give me a formidable head start on hiding out.
Fuck, even if Sanchez lives after this attack, however successful it is, it might change his priorities.
Right, he won't be thinking about me.
He gives her money to go buy herself some new clothes, and she again seethes for the offense. He asks her as she's leaving where Sanchez banks, and she says Banco de Isthmus, and leaves. We cut to Bond being driven to the bank and entering the grand office of its manager, Montelongo, played by Claudio Brook. The Banco de Isthmus is in real life the astonishingly elaborate and still functioning main post office of Mexico City.
Really? Still functioning, huh?
What you're looking at is their fucking post office. That's fancy.
That's a very fancy post office.
Bond tells Monty that he wants to make a deposit, and Monty says he has tellers downstairs that can handle that. Then Bond's giant case of cash is brought in, and Monty's all, "Please, sit down," with a shit-eating grin.
It's funny how a giant case of cash will change anybody's attitude.
Every time. Goddamn right.
All the time.
They've done studies,
They've done studies.
We then cut to the lobby of the bank, and Sanchez is giving a tour to investors with his left-hand man, Truman Lodge, played by Anthony Stark. Truman Lodge is the white-collar money man, cut from Jamie Dimon or something. He pitches they operate the world's largest investment fund. Sanchez interrupts, "The biggest problem is what to do with the money." Truman Lodge continues, "They funnel cash through this bank into the Fed somehow to build legitimate credit for non-legitimate enterprises." Sanchez again cuts the jargon, joking someone's got to help the gringos with their trade deficit. Ouch, man, too soon. 2023 debt default. Cutting back to Monty, we see him telling his secretary to make a deposit receipt for $4,900,000 for Bond. So between spending it and some blowing away on the plane, I'm guessing Bond's gone through $100,000 already. But he did buy a speedboat and rent a Rolls and a suite with a case of Dom, and him's not paying for it this time. Plus, he keeps just handing everyone fucking cash because fuck Sanchez. Bond tells Monty to expect a deposit in the same amount every month, and Monty jizzes his gold-trimmed silk undies. Just at that moment, Pam walks in a dress that's all business and a super short haircut. Bond asks for a line of credit at the casino, and Monty says, "No worries." Cut to Wayne fucking Newton.
Wayne fucking Newton?
He's playing Professor Joe Butcher, who at this moment we just see on a telly for a second before focusing on Sanchez. Apparently, though, Wayne Newton has always wanted to be in a Bond film and has badgered Cubby about it for years. I think Cubby broke.
Is that why Wayne Newton is in this movie?
Yes.
I was very pleased to see Wayne Newton. I didn't know he was such a huge James Bond fan.
Wayne is out at some Aztec sacrificial altar and doing the PBS pledge drive for Jesus. Call in and donate so much money, and after a while, he starts rattling off donation sizes. What's actually going on is he just broadcast the product drop and price, and is now relaying order size as Sanchez, Lupe, and Truman Lodge watch it all through the Charade televangelist program at an office in Sanchez's casino. While all this is going on, Sanchez asks Lupe about Crest losing the stash and money, saying she was on the boat. She must have seen something of this man Crest was talking about, but Lupe feigns ignorance, which isn't good for Crest's believability.
Yeah, it's just a weird character, her.
Nope.
No?
Nope, she's not.
She's not weird?
Nope, she's not. Abused.
She's just abused.
And weak.
Yes, I know.
George Russick plays a pit boss in the Isthmus Casino and calls up to Sanchez saying there's a British guy here, dropping $250,000 and asking for no limits, playing like a total jerk-off. Don Shroud plays Heller, who speaks up about Bond flying in on a private plane and opening an account at the bank. $5 million in cash. Now, two things. One, Sanchez has an iguana on his shoulder the whole scene. And two, why doesn't Sanchez immediately have a tingle? That $5 million is how much was stolen from him by a supposed mystery man. I'd at least note the coincidence, if not be outright suspicious.
It's really odd that you deposited the exact same amount of money that was stolen from me. Like the day after. In my bank.
In my bank.
Right?
Bruh.
It wouldn't ring any bells.
But Sanchez lets him play, and we focus on Bond in the casino, which was filmed at the Casino Espanol. Bond plays all spots at blackjack and is clearing house with Pam. Back with Sanchez, and Truman Lodge is ecstatic watching the program, knowing the buyers all accepted the new price. "Bless your hearts," Wayne Newton keeps saying. I know he's Joe Butcher, but I'm calling him Wayne Newton.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know he's playing a character, but that's Wayne fucking Newton.
Bond is winning too much, and Lupe is sent to clean him out. Her reveal is meant as a visual homage to Sylvia Trench and Dr. No. Bond sends Pam for a martini and asks Lupe if he's gonna lose, and she says, not much. We then cut to Pam ordering a drink with jerk-off and rim job gestures.
I really appreciate the jerk-off gesture when she ordered the martini, because she was really annoyed.
Pam is pissed watching Bond with Lupe, seeing the familiarity. Lupe tells Bond to skip town while he can, and Bond asks where Sanchez is. She says upstairs, in his office, planning a big party for some Orientals tomorrow night. And you can't call them that, lady.
No, you can't. Not anymore.
Bond makes sure she doesn't squeal about the wave crest and asks her to take him to Sanchez. Pam, defeated, drinks Bond's martini. Outside Sanchez's office, Bond is frisked and disarmed, then brought in by Heller. Inside, Bond scopes the armor-light windows and adjacent rooftops. They have Bond sit, and Sanchez peruses Bond's passport. Well-traveled man. What's with the gun? Bond says he's a problem eliminator, but temporarily unemployed and looking for a job. And Sanchez says, you've got cojones, but no one saw you come in, and no one has to see you leave. But Bond hits the spot when he brings up loyalty, and Sanchez says they may talk again, sending Bond away without his gun.
What is Bond ever gonna do? He keeps losing his gun. He's got no backup pieces. There's nobody around. All he's got is $5 million in cash. Duh. Go buy a new gun. You're in a Mexican town. I'm sure you can find a gun.
Bond leaves and Sanchez tells Heller to check him out. Back at the hotel, Bond is told his uncle has arrived and is in his suite. In the lift, Pam rips away her dress and gives Bond her gun. He tells her to stay by the lift, and she chafes again before pulling another gun out of her purse. Bond hits the suite's doorbell, and when the door is starting to open, he shoulder tackles the door and knocks back Q, because who else would check in as his uncle?
Yeah, right?
So after spearing an old man, Q goes over his gadgets. Everything for a man on holiday. Explosive alarm clock, plastic explosive toothpaste. Just then, Pam bursts in, and Bond introduces Q and Pam to each other. Q's next gadget is a camera that turns into a smart rifle, coded to Bond's palm, which is a thing that they're making in real life now. Pam says, "Smile, boys," and holds up a Polaroid camera, and Q panics. "Don't use the flash!" She snaps the photo, and a laser beam shoots across the room and into the obligatory El Presidente photo. The Polaroid was also an X-ray. 2-for-1 gadget.
Why was the picture in X-ray?
Dude, the Presidente portrait was an X-ray?
Yeah, it was. I was like, what the fuck? That's
Here we go with the Acme bullshit again.
right.
You see what I mean about tonal shift? We have dudes getting eaten by sharks, women getting spanked, and then this stupid shit. Pam takes one room of the suite and shuts the door, leaving Bond to walk to the other room saying, "I hope you don't snore, Q." The next day, we see Bond giving Pam a bunch of chips and saying, "Bonus pay. Now take Q and get the fuck out of here." She says she wants to stay, and he says he works better alone, even though he always works with allies and females, or lately, female allies.
I laughed out loud when he said that. I was like, since when? Like since when have you ever worked alone?
Never.
Like, you always have somebody. Ever. When have you ever worked alone?
I'm thinking. Nope, never. Even in alternate universes.
Never.
Bond goes to the roof of the casino and starts gearing up to rappel down. Cutting to Sanchez's Oriental party, we see him entertaining Asian guests, including Kwang, played by Shang Tsung. Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa.
Mortal Kombat!
Fucking legend.
He was also in Black Rain with Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes.
As Sanchez does his charming, joking, but dangerous pitchman act, Bond descends to their office window. And John Glenn pigeon jump scare, everyone, our last one.
Yay!
Bond lays out the toothpaste plastique with a cigarette case detonator, while Sanchez reminds the audience of his control of political and other authoritative rivals by the Pablo Escobar method of silver or lead. He also lets us know his distribution empire currently spans the breadth of the Americas from Chile to Alaska. Sanchez, once in the Asian market, and is trying to find partners overseas.
I just like how fucking schmarmy and smooth and charming Robert Davi is in this entire scene. He's selling whatever he's selling, and I would have bought it too. I'm like, man, this dude is so cool.
The huevos on Sanchez, though. He wants $100 million, franchise territorial rights up front, and another $20 million per metric ton of product. Now, I looked up countless articles from 1989, the average price per gram, ounce, and so on. I did the math, and the average value of a metric ton of cocaine at the end of the 1980s was $17,637,000. The average ounce being $500 and there being 32,274 ounces in a metric ton. In short, they're paying them subscription fees to overcharge the product by almost $2.5 million a ton. But hey, they're guaranteed quality and price for 5 years. No wonder this guy has the world's largest drug empire.
Right?
And you don't agree? We'll feed you to sharks.
There's the other thing.
Cut your heart out.
I think I'd rather have sharks.
Quang says, surely, if we're investing $100 million, we should see some product. And Sanchez says, tomorrow, I will take you to the main distribution center. And then Sanchez sends the guests into a room full of women, saying, no more business. Cutting to Bond now on the rooftop across from the casino, he's assembling his camera rifle and arming the detonator. Inside the office, Sanchez is talking to El Presidente. Ali Karim Bey's corrupt son is complaining his take is half the usual pullet bribe. Sanchez cuts him a check, smiling maliciously, intimidatingly, posturingly, and saying, you were very quiet when I was arrested. Remember, you're only president for life.
It's very threatening. It's like, yeah, life can be short, homie.
That's all we're saying. Cutting back to Bond, who swings his scope over to see Heller in another room handing something to Pam. The orchestra stings and Bond's eyes flare. He swings back to Sanchez and blows the window. He goes to fire but is jumped by a fucking ninja. Shit, make that two. And one of them brought a net.
You would think Bond would have experience with ninjas by now since he kind of just invented them.
And owned them many times in their own training clubs. Bond puts up a fight but is incapacitated. He's taken in a 1981 Chevrolet Caprice Classic to a nondescript rundown abode. Quang has his ninjas hold Bond down and presses Bond's rifle into his own palm, unlocking it. Quang wonders aloud who'd have a signature gun. In steps Fallon, M's man in Isthmus, sent after Bond, played by Christopher Neame. He asks Bond how he got the gun and tells Quang that Bond is rogue. Quang is Hong Kong narcotics and has been working this for years. He just hopes that little stunt of Bond's hasn't scared him off for good.
And see, if agencies just talk to each other.
It was a lot harder without the internet, though.
No, a whole lot harder without the internet.
That was back in the day where you got in trouble in one state, you just moved to another, baby. Bond is strapped to a table and about to be drugged for transport back to the UK when the place is attacked by people who followed them there. And by attacked, I mean they shot the building with a fucking 1942 M5A1 Stuart tank.
To be honest, if I was going after somebody like James Bond and I knew exactly where I had him, a tank would be one of my first options. Like, he keeps getting away. Well, let's just up the ammo.
At least they stopped using animals. A ninja and Fallon are killed in the shelling. Quang is mortally wounded, and his last ninja, Lottie, played by Diana Lee Sue, runs to his side as Heller and his soldiers enter. Lottie fights the goons in hand-to-hand combat and wastes one with an M16 before being brutally shot down by Heller. Bond is super lucky again because, just like Lupe helping him out with the wave crest, Quang takes the fall for the hit attempt, and it makes Bond look even more credible as he was strapped to their table. Enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of look.
Exactly.
Quang bites a cyanide cap and dies. They find Bond tied to a table and take him with them. He wakes up in a palatial room with the creepiest man-fish statue ever. Why are there so many creepy fish statues in this fucking movie? It's because the Sanchez estate is the real-life Villa Arboresque on the beach near La Brisas in Acapulco, built by Baron Enrico di Portanova.
And he was into creepy fish?
A flamboyant member of the international jet set who once listed the best things in life as sun, sex, and spaghetti.
I don't want to even know how all those three coincide.
The estate houses an underwater-themed disco, 3 swimming pools, a rooftop helipad, and the funicular railway scene in the film, which does run down to the beach. Bond wanders downstairs and Lupe tells him that the Wave Crest is coming in tonight and Crest is coming there. Bond says, good, even though Crest could totally finger him. Lupe exits the scene and Sanchez lights a cigarette for Bond, asking about last night. Bond says the hit team must have recognized him in the casino, and Sanchez showed up in the nick of time, as they were afraid Bond would warn Sanchez about them. Sanchez says, then you must have known them. And Bond says, we kept dossiers on them when I worked for the British government. Sanchez smiles, being told this openly.
Yeah, Bond's playing this just perfect.
Honestly.
Just give him just a bit, just enough honesty.
To manipulate it.
To be plausible. Right. It's very, very Yojimbo.
Sanchez said, who would try to kill me? And Bond says, someone close to you. Bond also says that they were well briefed, and it had to be someone inside of Sanchez's op, but they didn't say a name. He did, however, say they were expecting to be paid a great deal of cash by someone arriving in Isthmus tonight. Sanchez needs to talk to some people and sends Lupe to take Bond back up the funicular. As Sanchez walks back to his beach lounge, Heller approaches saying, you're not going to believe who this guy is. And Sanchez smiles and says, a former British agent. Heller says, how'd you know that? And Sanchez says, because I know things. Sanchez also tells Heller he wants to meet Crest's boat tonight when it comes in, with Min and Lupe. He won't lie in front of Lupe. I don't know why he believes that.
Right?
Just some arbitrary thing that he believes.
Right.
Meanwhile, Bond and Lupe board a Super Preta to secretly leave the island. Cutting to Q and Pam in the hotel, Bond bursts through the door and shoves Pam on the bed, putting her own gun to her neck. He wants to know what she was doing in Heller's office. She says Sanchez has arranged to buy 4 Stinger missiles from the Contras. He's threatened to shoot down an American airliner if America doesn't back off. Heller had an immunity deal for getting the missiles back, but backed out when Bond failed his assassination attempt.
Oh, so Bond's fucking everything up for everybody.
For multiple countries.
On his
vendetta.
Yes.
Bond tells Pam to meet him at the harbor master's office in 2 hours and tells Q to get the rolls. Cutting to the bank, and Monty jumps up excitedly at the sight of Bond and his cases, but Bond flattens him back down to earth when he says he needs to make a withdrawal.
Oh, all that money.
Cutting again to later that night, and Bond is on the harbor master's pilot craft with Pam and Q. Pam is dressed as the harbor pilot and boards the Wave Crest. She takes the controls, and when the Wave Crest captain, played by Roger Cudney, asks if she thinks she's going in a little too fast, she slams the throttle forward and says, you want to drive? You take the wheel, and cheeses it.
Nobody stopped to think to maybe grab the crazy harbor master who just fucking crashed the boat?
Nope.
The
captain scrambles for the controls, and the ship smashes into a footbridge in the harbor, causing 2 goons to go for a dive. Sanchez does not look amused.
Yeah, I wouldn't look amused either.
Bond dives into the water, toting a sack, and we cut to Pam opening the moon pool at the bottom of the Wave Crest.
Because nobody chased her.
Bond boards and says, I'd stick to flying if I were you. And she slams her cap down and protests, I got the job done. Bond is being a right dick to her the whole movie, and she often stands up for herself and never deserves it.
No, never deserves it. Always doing a great job.
She also strips to a swimsuit in this scene, and it makes Bond smile.
It makes me smile too.
Outside, Crest welcomes Sanchez, who says Crest seems to be having a lot of problems lately and wants to know about the money Crest owes him. Crest says, let's talk inside. And we cut to Bond and Pam dumping the cash Bond stole from Crest into the pressure chamber. Back with Sanchez, and he tells his goons to look around for a safe or anything like that before following Crest on board.
Well played, Mr. Bond. Well played.
After Crest's story, Sanchez says he water skied to the plane and jumped on it. And Crest says, yeah, and then threw the pilots out and flew away. Heller turns his nose up as if he smells bullshit. Like a little bird, Sanchez says, in a manner similar to a cat toying with his food.
Pretty much. I give you that.
Down below, Bond and Pam hide when the goons come in looking around. The goons find the cash pile in the chamber, and Bond sends Pam and her lazy eye back to the pilot craft. Bond, however, sticks around for the show, as Sanchez has Crest brought down and the chamber opened, revealing the $5 million. Give or take. That's not my money, Crest swears. That's right, amigo, Sanchez seethes. It's mine. You think I'm stupid, eh? Rip me off and pay someone with my own money to kill me? You want it so bad? Then take it! And Sanchez throws Crest into the chamber, turns it on. The pressure builds, and Crest begs for his life, swearing the truth that he didn't steal the money. And Heller gives Sanchez an axe, who then uses it to sever an airline, causing rapid decompression so extreme that Crest's head fucking explodes, scanner style.
It was just such an odd use of syntax that cost this man his life. That's not my money. He could have said that differently. He could have said, that's not your money. He could have said, I don't know where this money came from. He could have said a whole lot of other things other than, that's not my money. Because I would have said the same thing Sanchez said. I would have said, you're right. That's not your money. That's my fucking money.
With that gruesome show over, Bond dives down and away. Perez, played by Alejandro Bracco, says, what about the money, Patron? And Sanchez says, launder it.
Haha, double entendre.
That one was pretty good.
It was not bad.
Cutting to Bond at the harbor, and he is again telling Pam and Q to bugger off. He abandons them on a dock and takes the boat away. Cutting to later, Sanchez is arriving back to his villa when he and Perez enter Bond's room to find him in bed. Sanchez tosses him some fat stacks and says, the info you gave me paid off. I've got the guy who set me up. To which Bond says, only one guy. Sanchez is shook. He asks Bond what he means, and Bond says, well, no one would be stupid enough to try and take you on alone. And Sanchez laughs at this in a flattered way.
Yeah, Bond is totally playing this guy like a fiddle.
He tells Bond he wants him to join him tomorrow and leaves. Lupe comes in literally right after, and Jesus, man, that fucking fish is taking my soul. Stop fucking staring at me.
Stupid fishes.
Lupe wants Bond to run away and take her with him. They bang. Fuck monogamy. But this bites him as later Lupe shows up at Bond's hotel and tells Pam that she slept with Bond last night. Pam is hurt because the script told her to be, even though she should hate this guy. Q rolls his eyes and steps in.
I don't even know why she's jealous, because she slept with him on a handshake.
She's so headstrong, and honestly, she
doesn't really need him.
She's demeaned by him constantly. Like, she would hate him in real life.
Right.
Lupe tells them about the trip and says if anything happens to James, she don't know what she'll do. She loves him oh so much. Q shoves Lupe out the door, and Pam says she'll be damned if she helps James. Q says field operatives must use every means to reach their objectives, and Pam screams, bullshit!
Yeah. I agree with Pam.
I agree with Q. I don't care if it's your dick, if it's your computer, or if it's your gun. You save the world.
You save the world.
We cut to Bond's convoy making its way downtown, and Q looking like a barrio sweep. His broom is a radio, though, and he transmits the convoy's description and direction to Pam. Pam, meanwhile, has showed up to the airstrip for her Beechcraft Baron, but Sanchez's men are dismantling it. Cutting to Sanchez boarding an aerospatial Écureuil, where Dario greets him with the Stinger missiles. Cutting back to Bond being driven in a 1987 Maserati Biturbo to the insane religious cult meditation center run by Professor Joe Newton.
My favorite location of the whole movie. This place was kind of dope. I liked it.
This place is beyond dope.
Yeah. You're right.
This unreal location is the Centro Ceremonial Automai, a real-life boondoggle that at the time was essentially abandoned and perfect for filming in. Now, in universe, it was just meant as a front, but the conman leader managed to actually turn a nice profit as well. We then see Pam in a stolen Piper Super Cub flying in the background. Inside the facility, Truman Lodge hands out some dust masks and says, right, this way. Then we cut outside for some amazing foreground model work as Sanchez's chopper comes in to land. How long has it been since we've had a nice giant base, one you could fly a helicopter in?
Oh man, it's been a while. When that thing opened up, I was like, man, I love this place. This is awesome.
Cutting back to the tour, and Truman Lodge explains that their product is dissolved into gasoline for smuggling. He's asked how he gets it back, and Sanchez enters saying, hey, you want us to give you all our secrets before we're partners. They chuckle, and the tour moves on. Before you ask, though, yes, this is not only possible in real life, it's been done.
Yeah.
Dario notices Bond, but in the dust mask, so only asks who the new guy is. We then cut to the exterior gate where Pam is being dropped off in a pig farmer's beat-up 1973 Datsun. She tells the gateman that she wants to visit Professor Wayne and is turned away until she flashes a big bag full of fat stacks, and that changes his mood.
It always does.
Every time.
Fat stacks change attitudes.
60% of the time it works every time.
Hmm.
Back with Bond, and the tour is ending. Truman Lodge tells them that they can remove their mask, which everyone does immediately, except for Bond. Dario is already suspicious, and seeing this, now follows behind Bond, getting a good view of the man he saw in the barrelhead when Bond finally reveals himself.
So now Bond's in a pickle. I don't understand why he wouldn't just walk up to Sanchez like, look, I had a run-in with your boy. Things might get hectic. That might have just calmed things down just enough for him to not have to just blow the place up.
Or maybe it would have been a bridge too far and started making Sanchez suspicious.
Maybe.
Cutting again to Pam being toted in a T-bird to Donkashane, she acts starstruck and wide-eyed, playing the small-town zealot to his pseudo-seductive cult leader. He offers for her to study there and says, come along, let's see if you have the aptitude. This Vegas show performer was born for this role. He's so believable as a perverted con man.
Oh yeah, totally. Wayne Newton played this just perfectly. Like he'd been studying televangelist for all of his life, which I'm pretty sure he has.
Back with Bond, and Sanchez's chemist is running down the process of extracting the coke from the petrol when Dario sticks a gun to Bond's back and tells him to keep quiet. The extraction continues, creating a narco sludge and a beaker of petrol. Back with Pam, and she's taken right to Wayne's humble sanctuary away from the cares of the world, which he locks the door to behind them. He also had it soundproof so nothing will disturb their meditation. That's when she pulls a gun on this clown. He says this isn't necessary, and without a second thought or a single word, no warning, no bullshit, nothing, she fires inches left of him and into his favorite poster.
In his soundproof room. Nobody's going to hear that. Smart girl.
She takes his keys and a robe, leaving him dumbfounded, saying again, bless your heart. Cut back to Bond. Dario still got him held up, and the music is getting tense. Sanchez tells the investors to keep the gas as a bonus, and if there's any problem with customs, no evidence, as he lights the petrol beaker, creating a brief flash, which Bond uses as an opportunity to headbutt Dario and toss the flaming beaker into more beakers, creating an even bigger fire.
Yeah, as soon as he threw that beaker, I was like, well, here we go. Climax time. Place is about to blow up.
Yeah, and it's been a while. We had the layer, and it has to just start coming down for no reason. This
For
is
no
huge
reason. Here it goes.
Stone facility, but a small fire is everything's blowing up now.
It's a domino effect.
It's the Bond effect.
Right?
They grab Bond and punch him in the gut before dragging him out of the office as everyone evacuates the facility. And we go back to old times as the place starts just falling apart for no reason. Dario punches Bond more and says, I know him. He's an informer. Sanchez seethes. You disappoint me. Who are you working for? Tell me. They bind Bond's wrists, and Heller yells that he can save the trucks, but not the whole place. And Truman Lodge says, wait a minute, this place cost us $32 million. We have to try and save it. I don't give a shit about the setup. We have $50 million in the case and 20 tons of Columbia pure in the tankers. Well, I mean, then it ain't that pure anymore. It sounds like it's mixed with gas.
Right? That doesn't sound pure to me at all. Sounds kind of tainted.
He means it was pure when it went in, though.
Right.
Sanchez sends Wall Street to help Heller. Then they put Bond on the conveyor belt that feeds cocaine into the crusher. Sanchez tells him when he's up to his ankles, he'll be telling him everything. And when he's up to his knees, he'll kiss his ass to kill him. Bond tries to get out by pitting Sanchez against more of his men, but Sanchez still leaves him to die. Bond goes over the edge, but his bindings catch a hook. Dario stays behind and strikes his switchblade pose one last time before climbing over the rail to deal with Bond.
Yep, you just knew.
He spits on Bond and starts cutting the cord. He cuts Bond's hands apart, and Bond grabs the edge with one hand as Pam enters in the white robe, glowing. Dario is shook. He laughs and says, "You're dead." "You took the words right out of my mouth," she says, and shoots him. Dario falls back, and Bond pulls him into the grinder, and we get another gruesome death. In my opinion, it's the most gruesome death in the Bond franchise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely the most gruesome. I don't think it was the most cold-blooded, but definitely the most gruesome.
This time complete with guttural screaming.
And blood splatter.
Bond tells Pam to switch the machine off, and she immediately knows where to go to do it and how to.
Well, she's a pilot after all.
We then cut to Sanchez approaching Heller, stealing the Stinger missiles, and they impale him on a forklift, sending it crashing through a wall to meet his dead end, which was a stupid joke, but it's just what Bond and Pam need to escape the facility. But, before you say anything, Sanchez didn't know Bond was alive still, and also, who the fuck is Pam? You don't know.
Fair to all of those points.
Sanchez jumps in his Maserati to escape, and when he runs into Truman Lodge and his money, he points an Uzi at him and says, "You, come with me." There's lorries getting away, jeeps, cars, and Pam pulls up to chase him down in a fucking golf cart.
Huh.
Which also, take your fucking time getting into, James.
Right? Place is only blowing the fuck up.
As they cart to the gate, they pass a running Professor Joe Butcher, and she swipes her bag of money from him, saying, "Surprise!" leaving him with nothing but his catchphrase.
At least he had lines. I mean, they may have been the same line over and over again, but he had lines.
"Bless your heart." They cart to her Super Cub, hidden in the brush, and she flies him over one of the 1989 Kenworth W900 lorries that they used for this sequence.
Duh, pretty dope trucks back in the day.
He jumps onto the tanker, and Sanchez fires at him immediately and incessantly. Bond traverses to the cab, and the driver pulls a knife, so Bond punches him and sprays him with a fire extinguisher before tossing him onto the bonnet of Sanchez's car. Sanchez radios Perez to inform him Bond's escaped and to meet him at Paso El Diablo, which, in real life, is the Rumerosa Pass in Mexicali.
Huh.
He then tells the driver in front of Bond not to let him pass, so the lorry driver swerves back and forth like a custom in Houston on the freeway in 5 o'clock traffic.
Fair. Not really. That's some real ass shit, but whatever.
Up ahead, Sanchez is preparing a Stinger missile to fire, and back with Bond as he plays Duel 2. This time, they're both big rigs. The lorries were supposed to knock each other back and forth, and then someone had to give it the juice and slam the other one into a fucking mountain. This was unintentional and caused the rest of the sequence to be rewritten around it.
Wow, that accident was an accident, huh?
It looked cool as hell, though, until the driver popped out like, "Ooh," and a reflector comically popped off.
Huh. Yes, that was a little silly.
Every time the tone gets good,
It was like G.I. Joe, the explosion and then the parachute. We're okay.
Perez then fires the missile at Bond, who uses a conveniently placed mound of earth to do the old diamonds are forever trick yet again, but this time it's with a goddamn tanker. The tanker is really on one side and driving as they fire a real rocket underneath it. A rig was devised to have the tanker drive tilted but proved unnecessary. Remy fucking Julian appeared on location, no crash helmet, no seatbelt, put a ramp up and just drove up and put the tanker on its side. It's genuinely amazing.
Good fucking job. I was like, that was a very dope stunt.
He nailed it all the way down to his marker.
Yeah.
In the universe, though, the Stinger missile hits the wrecked tanker behind Bond, and Bond drives his tanker to the goon jeep and lets the truck down on the jeep, destroying it. This movie's fucking awesome. Bond's tires are shot out, and he manages to stop just at the edge of a cliffside. Perez and the goons are running up and gunning, and Bond gets out as Pam flies over, crop dusts the goon squad, which of course puts them out of commission.
Of course.
We've been mildly inconvenienced. Oh no.
That's how that works. Too much dust, I can't shoot.
I mean, to be fair, there's probably like some pesticides.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, you'll get cancer later in life. Ooh.
Right.
Go get Bond.
Get up, you sissies.
Bond then releases the tank hitch, and the tank slides down towards Sanchez, colliding with yet another tanker in front of the villain. Truman Lodge curses at the fireball of financial loss. Then he says, "Brilliant, Franz. Another 80 million write-off." To which Sanchez responds, "I guess it's time to start cutting overhead." And he lights up Truman Lodge and his stupid name with his micro Uzi.
You've been hanging out with this dude for how long now? And now at this high stress point in his life and yours, you decide this is the time where you're going to voice your full and vocal opinion to the psychopath holding a gun on you.
Yep.
Yeah. Smart move, Truman.
Because money means more to Truman than his brains and his life. He's very one-dimensional.
Apparently.
Bond rides off in his lorry. Perez and squad are back up and steal an 88 Dodge Ram to get back in the fight. Sanchez loads his stingers onto his last tanker and rides off in front of an amazing explosion. Bond pops a wheelie in the lorry and goes through the flames. Bullshit.
Specially constructed lorries can do that.
That's not it, though.
No.
That one cannot.
You can see them at truck shows and shit. There's one that turns into like Optimus Prime and drives around.
Sanchez shoots Bond's windscreen as he approaches, and Bond hits cruise control before kicking out the screen and egressing to the bonnet. He grabs onto the ladder of Sanchez's tanker and lets loose the valve on the back, spilling petrol all over the road. It's important to note that after Bond's flaming wheelie, Perez and co. just ride through the flames and now have flaming tires. Well, I guess now they have a flaming truck. Oh, look, there it goes off the cliff. Almost hitting Pam's plane as she flies underneath their flaming stunt work.
Man, this is a Rockstar Games movie. Look at this. Jumping cars over planes. Totally Rockstar video games move right there.
That explains the tonal shifts, actually, between silliness and violence.
Yep.
It's a Rockstar game the whole time.
It's a Rockstar game the whole time.
Grand Theft Auto, Isthmus City. Bond moves toward the cab and Sanchez fires his stinger, hitting the tail of Pam's Cub. The rocket they fired in real life for the missile here hit a guy working on a phone pole miles away and injured his arm. This is this dude in Mexico working on a pole in the desert, and all of a sudden a fucking...
Right? Wait. And then all of a sudden he gets hit by a fucking missile out of nowhere.
This rocket just hit me in my arm. What the fuck? He's miles away from their shoot, too.
What kind of controls did the Master of Arms have where we're just going to fire a missile in a random direction and just hope it doesn't hit somebody?
I'm pretty sure they thought the desert was pretty empty at the time and didn't know there would be a random guy working on a pole out there.
I guess. I mean, what are the odds, right?
The driver slams on the brakes, and Bond is thrown into the back of the lorry as Sanchez comes out and after him swinging a fucking machete. But Sanchez, raging and blinded by red, swings into the hydraulic lines, severing the brakes. The last tanker rolls away free as we cut to Pam just to make sure she landed safe, and also that she sees the lorry that Bond abandoned to jump onto Sanchez's tanker.
The stunt sequence was well done, but the physics were kind of bothered me on it.
With that established, we go back to Bond and the fight continues on the back of the tanker as the driver dives out and the tanker rolls off the side of a steep road. There's petrol spilling everywhere and Sanchez is soaked. Bond tries to crawl away, but Sanchez stands over him with the machete. He drags Bond to his feet, leans him up against a rock, rears back to hack. "You could have had everything," Sanchez laments. "Don't you want to know why?" Bond asks. And Sanchez pauses, because, yeah, he wants to know why. Who the fuck wouldn't?
Right? Like, what did I do to you? Why?
But before anyone can speak, Bond pulls out the lighter Felix and Della gave him, lets Sanchez read it, and then sparks the trick flame, engulfing Sanchez. Sanchez burns to death, screaming, as the last tanker explodes, and Bond barely runs away in time. He's wounded. He's exhausted. But if you look, you see this moment of pain in his face. Like he's just now allowed himself a moment to grieve. Now that it's done. It's almost a micro-expression, and it's brilliant nuance.
I like that Timothy Dalton played this whole scene pretty well. I mean, after the truck hit the ground, he was crawling across the ground, beaten up, broken. It's like this vendetta is costing him everything. It's everything.
It's costing everybody everything.
Right. No, it doesn't matter. It's like he's burning the fucking world down right now.
I was about to say, like, no one wins in this, honestly.
Right?
Like, Felix lost his wife. He lost his leg.
Yep. Bond lost his job.
He gets it back, but, like, even still, like, the Istanbul job was fucked. He fucked this job up for the Americans.
And the Japanese.
Yeah. Oh, well, Hong Kong.
Right? Hong Kong. Sorry.
Got them killed. Everybody loses in this. And I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
When justice is blind, everybody loses.
Everybody loses.
Pam drives up in the surviving tankless lorry and says, "What are you waiting for? Get in." And Bond smiles, throws up his hands, and says, "Yes, sir."
Good.
Wow. Again, he grew.
Yeah.
He's treating her with respect.
Treating her with a little respect, and Bond always has an exit strategy, even if he doesn't have an exit strategy.
Cutting to a party thrown by Lupe at the old Sanchez estate, Bond is on with Felix, who sounds jovial for a man that
Just lost a wife, an arm, and a leg.
just lost his leg and wife. But the important bit is, he tells Bond M has a job for him. He gets off the phone and Lupe thanks him for everything with 2 kisses. Pam is dashed and runs away, and Bond ditches Lupe to jump off the terrace into the pool below and next to Pam, who he pulls into the water and close to him. They spin and kiss, and Q drinks. Bond kisses Pam some more, and we pan to another fish statue, and then thank God cut to a freeze frame of the pool as the credits roll past, and Patti LaBelle's If You Ask Me To plays us out.
Very nice. I love that song too.
It's all right. It's a good outro.
It hits me a little different because it's of the culture.
I'm giving this movie a B+. The script fits the era. I love the 80s action Bond. It's dark, it's fun, and somehow still unique. Dalton lightened up. The movie got more serious. The girl is no nonsense. The villain is outstanding. The henches are even intimidating. It starts a little cheesy and has a couple of moments, but it just helps Dalton feel more like the Bond a lot of people wanted him to be.
I can't agree with you more, except I gave this movie an A-.
Ooh.
This was one of the first Bond movies that wasn't like a Bond movie. Like, there was no overarching world-threatening plan. It's a fucking drug dealer selling drugs out of a televangelist spot who killed or fucked with Bond's friends. And Bond was like, fuck that shit. Let's do this. The plot was straightforward, simple. There was no running around the bush about it, no convoluted plans. Just Bond and a bad guy. And I loved it.
For the kill count, how many do you think Bond kills in this movie?
He killed everybody. No, just kidding.
Your license to kill is revoked. Kills everybody.
He kills everybody. I would say like 13 people, something like that.
10.
10?
13 die by other means for a total of 23. Definitely kicking it up a little bit more. But wait till the next movie. Pre-title. The pre-title, as I've said, is very out of tone with the rest of the film, at least when not focused on Sanchez. That Valentine fatality was brutal, but still, there's a runway battle, a sky chase and capture, plus skydiving. 4th place.
I like the pre-title. There's a lot of action in the pre-title sequence and a lot of camp as well. But, you know, they established the Christopher Nolan nod before Christopher Nolan was born. It was very well done. Just a lot of action for an opening sequence. I gave it a 4th place myself.
For the title, I said the titles were some of, if not the worst, I've seen him put out. The half-hearted rotoscoping and random imagery was jarring at times, and I'm sorry to all her fans, but I'm not the biggest fan of this song. It's not bad, but it ain't jamming to me. Sorry that you were dying of old age, 16th place.
Wow. I wasn't so hard on it because I felt my man tried to do something.
Play with a new computer?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It felt like it was trying. And I didn't mind the song that much. It wasn't horrible. It didn't bother me. It was very 80s poppy, that genre. So I gave it 6th place.
Moneypenny pickup line. Bond doesn't even speak to, look at, send a message to, or in any other way interact or communicate with Moneypenny. Goodbye, Miss Bliss, 17th place.
I gave this 16th place because there was no Moneypenny pickup line, but she was in it, which is better than everything past 16th place.
Fair enough. Q gadgets. Q has all the goodies. Broom radios, explosive alarm clock, but he gives Bond concealed plastique and detonator, also a smart rifle disguised as a camera. And all of these things exist. Well, maybe not the broom radio. 6th place.
I gave this a little higher because, you know, Q was there. Q was a field agent this time. He counts as his own gadget. Who knows what Q brought with him? I gave it 4th place.
Cars. Bond drove a lorry and piloted boats and planes. He was driven around in 2 different Rolls Royces, and yet he only drove a rented 1987 Lincoln Mark 7 for a car. 14th place.
I guess we'll give this a 14th place.
Main ally. Felix is a plot device, and Sharky is corny and unnecessary. The helpful aid by his and his Bond girl's side this time, helping him along with his mission and even staking out, was Q. Bond went rogue, and Uncle Q rode out like always, but this time he stuck around for more than one scene. He was helpful, he was dedicated, and he's our boy, 6th place.
You counted Q as the main ally this time, huh? And not Pam.
Yes, I did.
Well, if Q is going to be the main ally, they're going to get the same ranking, and that ranking is going to be 8th place.
Villains. Franz Sanchez, Colombian narco-terrorist going international, baby. Dripping with charisma and intimidation, but overly relying on loyalty and therefore easily manipulated into mistrust. He is never not awesome, whether he's cracking a joke, threatening someone casually, or just plain losing his shit with a machete. Dude scanners the dude. He had a realistic plan and was credibly terrifying and goddamn masterfully portrayed. 1st place.
Woo! I was really torn between the guy above him and where I put him. I gave him 2nd place because it was real close.
Main hench, Dario, a loyal, brash, psychotic that's not over the top more than his kill pose, just very violent. So many scene-stealing actors in one film, just playing so well off each other that you believe they really are a group of thugs. 4th place.
I, too, gave the dear Dario 4th place because Benicio del Toro is a fucking psychopath. Not quite as effective as the most effective henchmen have been, but he was probably the most terrifying. So, 4th place.
Bond girl Pam Bouvier, a badass ex-army pilot turned informant with no tolerance for bullshit. A bunch of guns, a plane, and a lazy eye. She's pretty cool and helps out, but never really does anything that makes or breaks his mission, really. Just kind of a helping hand. She spends a lot of the movie with Q and doesn't really grow at all herself. Just a way for Bond to grow. 8th place.
I give her 9th place. Basically for most of the reasons she said. She was more helpful than most of the Bond girls, in my opinion. She was strong. She was fucking on top of her shit, confident. She handled that bar fight like a fucking champ. Like, come on. It's way better than most of the Bond girls.
One-liner. I guess I'm going to go with he met his dead end. There were so many witty comebacks and snappy answers to questions, but not so many punny one-liners. I liked the wit, like I'd do anything for a woman with a knife, and how amusing the other characters are, with Q busting a few jokes, Sharky getting a punny one-liner, and Sanchez never stopping around investors. But the movie is a little bit more serious, and so is Bond. 8th place.
We're about on the same page here. I gave this 9th place with my one-liner being I'll survive when Sanchez asked him how he was feeling after he rescued him from the ninja thing. Because he said it in kind of like a question mark because he wasn't sure. Because, you know, he just woke up there. He's like, I'll survive.
That's actually a good point.
Right? So, yeah, I gave it 9th place, and that was my one-liner because that was pretty on point.
Locations. Florida Keys, Bahamas, Republic of Fictional Isthmus.
I gave this 7th place because, man, the locations were kind of on point, especially towards the end there. They were doing some nice overhead flying. That fucking church place, woo, gorgeous. You're right. When was the last time we had a lair?
It's been long enough. I wanted one.
Right? I didn't realize I missed lairs till I saw one. I was like, oh, yeah, lairs.
You know, when you don't do it every time, it's great.
Right?
You know, you just let shit breathe. That's the trick.
That's the trick.
This movie was being made after new taxes passed and was the first shot entirely out of the UK, besides some pickup B-roll, of course. The locations are great, and they make sure to showcase exciting landmarks and architecture. The location scouts were on point, finding these villas and abandoned native institutes. It does get drab in the Isthmus exterior locations, though, and I'm going with 12th place, mostly because one of the 3 places is fictional.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Protracted attempt to kill Bond. They put Bond on a conveyor belt and let him ride down it, just hoping he'll be crushed. And yeah, Sanchez kicks him until he's hanging, but then he just leaves, and Dario decides to make sure he falls. But we saw how that worked out, and no one even checked to make sure that he got the job done. That being said, Dario did try to make sure. Bond was just saved by Deus Pamina.
Deus Pamina.
7th place.
I was a little bit harsher on the protracted attempt to kill Bond. At least it was the same one this time. Because it was like the conveyor belt and Dario. And neither of them worked out. I gave this 9th place.
Should have worked.
It
should have killed Bond. If you would have killed Bond, you'd have first. If one of these kills Bond, they're getting first.
They're getting first.
Protracted attempt to kill Bond. Who wins? The British with their missiles.
You're right.
Mission plot. Bond goes rogue for revenge after Felix is mutilated and his new wife murdered. The bad guy has a drug empire that he controls with either violence or bribes, depending how you want to play it. He has the largest cartel in the Americas and is looking to expand. It's a pretty good plot. It's very reasonable and plausible compared to some of the nonsense we've puzzled through. In fact, it's shit that happened all the time in that era and still does to this day with the cartel wars. In fact, the personal touch, I dare say, makes it even better than most. And the scale is massive. Billions and billions of dollars worth of drugs flooding the world and upsetting economies. 3rd place.
I was a bit nicer. And I'm breaking it down to, I guess I like the simplistic plots of the James Bond movies because if you remember correctly, my original number 1 was Live and Let Die. And if I'm not mistaken, that was a drug plot. So my new number 1 is this one because of the simplicity of the plot. It's just straightforward. Boom. This is it. This is what it's going to be. Booyah. No confusion.
It's so goddamn plausible because it's all been done before.
Right. Yep.
Stunts. Timothy does some great light stunt work that helps immersion. The stunt crew skydive, mount a plane from a helicopter, water ski with no skis, and dangle from planes. They jump from cars and explosions, all the normal fare. But they also drive a goddamn tanker on one side, and for a while, just to control land on a Jeep, destroying it. This movie rocks. 3rd place.
Man, I vacillated. I vacillated myself. We're pretty close on this one. I gave it 4th place. And I only gave it 4th place because I understand the technical aspect of all of the work that went into Thunderball at the time was masterful. So it's gonna be hard to beat that, but 4th place.
Thunderball's era was like, they just blew those dudes up. A little bit different. Those dudes were just legit on fire, okay?
You guys sign this waiver.
Sign it, please.
All right, now we're gonna do some filming.
Score.
I gave the score a nice solid 6, middle of the road. The opening song wasn't bad. The score throughout the movie wasn't intrusive, and it helped with the plot and the pacing. It would amp up at the proper amount of time and energize scenes properly, but it would never take you out of the movie and everything. It was a decently put together score.
It was an amazingly put together score. This score is more often than not dark, somber, either mourning or tense, exciting when need be, and light when called for. It's probably one of the most diverse outings from its neighbors. It greatly blends themes and goes hard frequently, and I'm giving it 4th place.
Woo!
Movie.
I don't know if this is going to be controversial. This is quite possibly one of the best Bond movies ever fucking made. I gave this movie 3rd place.
This movie has just the right amount of humor, after the title's toll, and the best amount of 80s action and macabre, violent, realistic tone. This is one of the best Bond movies ever made. Connery made some epics, but we forgave a lot. If we're honest, just go back and listen to our reviews. Dalton nailed it in this film. This film mostly nailed Dalton. They definitely nailed their era and made one of the most unique Bond films ever to this day. The performances were all stunning, and there were almost no fake sets. Again, it's easy to get immersed when everything feels so real. The stunts, the relationships, not the Bond girl, but the goons and the villain, and Bond and Q. I love this film. It is so much fun for me. 2nd place. And This is something that we sadly have to do after 2 films because of a 6-year hiatus that's about to happen to the franchise. So we're going to have to rank Mr. Dalton already.
No, Mr. Dalton doesn't deserve to be ranked yet. He's only had 2 whole movies, so he's going to be second place. If he had more movies, I'm confident at this point in our ranking he would be first place. If Timothy Dalton had 4, we would all be saying a totally different story.
Sadly, due to deaths, legal battles, and writer strikes, we won't see Bond for many, many years, and this will be the last we saw of Timothy Dalton, which sucks because he was great. The world was not ready for him, and we figured that out. He saved the franchise from the spiral that it was going down creatively and financially. His shift in tone would open the door that eventually leads Bond from hit-and-miss sequel factory to can't-miss event cinema. He paved the way for those after. Without him, after Roger, there is no GoldenEye, and there's definitely no Craig. Had he gotten more films, we might be talking about him today as the best Bond ever, the one that blended the books with the movies. But that's not how it worked out, and he's currently sitting at second place. And as they said, Bond will return, and so will we. Until then,
I'm Agent Carter.
I'm Agent Sedgwick.
Stay spying, y'all.